Another problem is the way that Dizdar instructs Christians who are followers of his teachings to act if they want to try to work with or help those with MPD, that being despite the fear and prejudice that he teaches against them. Which is sure to make people seeking help probably uncomfortable disease, because that kind of prejudice and fear and everything, and that coldness is going to come through. And this is the problem in the instructions. Quote, "If you meet a multiple, they may not show or tell you much, at least not at first. Most of them are, quote, intact, and don't even know that they are a multiple, much less a satanic super soldier. If you start to work with one or try to help them, don't start with, quote, you're a satanic chosen one who is going to kill many. If they have no idea what is inside, they may just fall apart. Start with where they are." Page 453. Okay, there are numerous problems here. In the context of paranoia and being on the lookout for those with MPD, Dizdar first speaks to his followers as if they are qualified to determine or assume whether someone has MPD or not. Dizdar states many of those with MPD do not know that they have MPD, so do not disclose it, and as such the implication is that the readers perhaps can figure it out. But many of the Christians reading this book are laymen who are not qualified to diagnose MPD and are inexperienced with what it looks like. Encouraging the readers to think they can suddenly be qualified to assume whether someone has MPD or not, is encouraging the readers to be ridiculously arrogant and presumptive, and dangerously so. Why? As covered earlier, a portion of those with MPD have seemed to acquire the condition or claim to have it after being exposed to the suggestion that they might have MPD, whether through hypnosis or the power of suggestion otherwise. To encourage the readers of Dizdar's book, to encourage the readers who are already taught paranoia to think they can determine who might have MPD is just one step away from the readers starting to suggest to a troubled person that their problem is MPD. Now, if a reader suggests to a troubled person that they might have MPD, there is some real chance that person might start to believe this suggestion, internalize this belief, and begin to develop symptoms of MPD where symptoms were not previously present. And this is documented that this happens. So it is downright irresponsible to suggest to troubled people that they might have MPD, seeing as the medical research shows some cases of MPD only developed after suggestion of MPD. So what is this? Well, the followers of Dizdar, his implication to them, that some people that have MPD don't even know it. And with all this paranoid being on the lookout, it could be you see a troubled person and you have no fracking clue what you were doing. And you think, well, they might have MPD because you're paranoid. And so maybe you suggest it to them. And maybe because you suggested it to them, they start believing it. And then they start acting like it, even though they didn't have that problem previously. And does that really happen? Can that really happen? Yes. The power of suggestion has been shown to cause some people to develop the symptoms of MPD, to develop having MPD even where they didn't have it. So this is dangerous. These teachings, or people that are following these teachings, are being encouraged to go out unqualified and make guesses and make assumptions and encourage people who are vulnerable and possibly suggestible to think that they have MPD, thus worsening their problems and opening them up, quite frankly, to a false belief that could then be met with some accompanying level of demonic oppression just for believing it. And this happens. It can happen through hypnosis, and it can happen just through the power of suggestion with certain people, with vulnerable people. Worse than this is Dizdar's prejudicial thinking, in that he clearly believes that those with MPD are 95% satanic super soldiers, and encourages his followers to assume the same when they meet anyone with MPD. but as covered, only 25 to 50% of those with MPD are also SRA, according to verifiable research. And a more realistic figure of those with MPD and SRA who are likely to cause harm is only 1.8 to 3.6%. So what is worse than taking a troubled normal person and suggesting to them that their problem is MPD, what's worse than that is taking someone who actually says they already have MPD and suggesting to them that they're a satanic super soldier. Why? Because of the power of suggestion. You take someone with MPD that has problems and you suggest to them, hey, maybe you're a satanic super soldier. Or suggest to them that they have SRA in their past. Now, why is that a problem? Because, as we covered earlier, there are people that have false memories of SRA. It does happen. And it's often power of suggestion which causes or precipitates that, whether through hypnosis or power of suggestion otherwise. And so if someone can find that they have false memories, if people have false memories of SRA through the power of suggestion, how much could they have false memories, false thoughts, whatever, through the power of suggestion to think that they're satanic super soldiers? When you just assume that everyone is, and then you start suggesting that to vulnerable people, it's going to likely, it would make total sense in a very scientific way. It's going to increase the number that actually seem to be there. Because at least some of those people are going to be suggestible and start believing it and start thinking, oh yeah, I remember, I remember this and that and the other thing. There are people out there like that. Then they're going to start claiming to be satanic super soldiers, even though they weren't when you started. It's contaminating these people by suggesting to them these problems coming from an assumption that they all have it anyway. But that's not what objective research shows. And this is just irresponsible. Now, Dizdar states to not start with telling them that they are satanic super soldiers. He states to not start with that. But the clear encouragement to his readers is to eventually work up to telling those with MPD that they are satanic super soldiers. This is very dangerous. People with MPD can be very suggestible and too easily go along with the opinion of someone they perceive themselves to depend upon. And this is usually as they have suffered severe abuse from someone they were dependent upon, and so had to learn, to some extent, to be malleable in fear so as to not upset the abuser, risking danger of abuse. In other words, they're already prone to a mentality of being malleable and suggestible. To go and to take someone like that and start pushing these kinds of ideas onto them assertively is just irresponsible. It's just criminal. Now, readers who might try to work with or help someone with MPD would be placing themselves into a role of trust with the person with MPD, just automatically. The person with MPD would be looking to the reader for help and answers. And that's what he's talking about. Let me go back to that quote. If you start to work with or try to help them. He's talking about his readers working with or trying to help people with MPD. Okay, which means they're going to be entering into some sort of trust-based role or relationship with that person as someone trying to help them. A person with MPD is going to be looking to them as sort of some sort of counselor or helper, someone who's helping them. Now, as that relationship of trust develops, what Russ is encouraging is for the reader of his book, who's now become some sort of counselor or help to someone with MPD, he's encouraging them to gradually work up to convincing the person with MPD, who is now more in the role of a client, that they are a satanic super soldier. And that is in the arrogance of the surety of his 95% of MPD are SRA, MC, satanic super soldiers. It's the arrogance of his surety of that. It is completely, absolutely irresponsible. It subjects suggestible people with MPD to potentially being brainwashed through the power of suggestion of someone they're seeing as a counselor, someone they're trusting, or someone they're looking to for help. It brainwashes them to think that they have had SRA when 50 to 75% have not, or that they themselves are dangerous and don't know it, when likely 96 to 98% are not. As covered, false memories are possible of SRA, and the suggestion of SRA could easily lead to someone with MPD developing false memories of SRA who previously had no such memories. Worse, insomuch as MPD can itself seem to develop through suggestion and has been shown to develop in therapeutic settings from the suggestion of a therapist. This includes the case of specific personalities in the course of MPD developed after suggestion. Child personality, therapist seems to be looking for to be there. The power of suggestion, suddenly, oh, we found one. That seems to develop. So what Dizdar is encouraging readers who have become counselors and help to do, what he's encouraging his readers to do, potentially allows for those with MPD to find, in truth, develop new personalities which are developed or invented as a result of suggestion. Thus, a new personality could be found or developed and make some effort to show that they are a satanic super soldier, along with the newly found false memories of SRA. And just to give a case example, I'm going to read this. This is off of the False Memory Syndrome Foundation website. I am not saying that all repressed memories that resurface are false memories. I'm not saying that at all. I think that both happen. I just want to point out that this also does happen. There are real repressed resurfaced memories, but there are also false memories. And that's based on testimonies on both sides. Both things happen. It's a confusing mess. Let me read this. The doctor decided I needed 5 to 7 years of therapy. He explained to me and my husband, so terrible that she's repressed those memories deep in her mind. Finally, she will work through those old feelings and get better. We bought it, and I worked hard to recall repressed memories. Of course, there were no real memories, but the mind is an amazing thing. Let me explain in lay terms how repressed memories were created on one occasion. The therapist called up Beth, a 5-year-old other personality, and hypnotized her. He suggested sexual abuse had occurred at the hands of her daddy. He explained that she needed to see a big movie screen in her mind and tell him what she saw. Then he asked leading questions about touching, etc. Beth performed just as the therapist predicted she would. Beth and I were rewarded with much attention and sympathy. In reality, I didn't have those memories, but the doctor considered them true and wanted more. For months, I allowed other alters to write anything they could remember. The memories grew worse, and I became horrified. I thought it was all true, and I felt worthless and betrayed. I recalled various fragments of movies, books, talk shows, and nightly news, and soon I had plenty of child abuse memories. But it didn't stop there. Eventually, I said I had taken part in satanic rituals, been buried alive, drank blood, and helped to kill a baby. With every new memory, my therapist was intrigued and building a case to prove he was right about me all along. I was rewarded with his attention to me and was his best patient. But I started to have feelings of death and became suicidal. I truly exhibited all of the MPD symptoms, even though I had learned them. Control of my mind, emotions, and will was given to the personalities the therapist had empowered. And I am actually quoting this out of Gary Bates's excellent book, Alien Intrusion. This is a case he uses in his chapter on hypnosis. And he's pulling it off the False Memory Foundation Syndrome website. The false memory syndrome does happen. It tends to happen through the power of suggestion. As you could hear in that, there was some level of people-pleasing. The person you were looking to, the trust in everything, she seems to have developed NPD having learned it because it was suggested to her. She seems to have developed SRA memories after the therapist seemed to be sure that they were there and was, looking for them and, of course, trying to please him and fulfill his expectations. Somehow this happened. She came up to it. She was open to it. And so the power of suggestion is very real. And so this does happen. There's testimonial evidence that this does happen. So it is dangerous. What Dizdar is encouraging his readers to do, first off, being unqualified. And second off, totally ignoring the power of suggestion, having already pretty much just condemned prejudicially all of these people to be a certain way, even though the objective medical research does not back that up whatsoever. It does not back up his numbers whatsoever. So, as I said, what Dizdar is encouraging readers, acting as counselors, to do potentially allows for those with MPD to find, in truth develop, new personalities, which are developed or invented as a result of suggestion and expectation pushed on them. So, thus a new personality could be, quote unquote, found, i.e. developed, and then make some effort to show that they're a satanic super soldier because the suggestions placed on them, because this is expected from their counselor friend that they're trusting, along with potentially newly found false memories of SRA. So then, coupled with all of these problems are the problems of demonic oppression and abuse, which were previously mentioned. Abuse and mistreatment, if not dealt with properly in the context of spiritual warfare principles, can become legal grounds for demonic oppression. Now, anyone, whether MPD, SRA, abused in the past or not, anyone could come under demonic oppression from being abused and not handling it biblically, God's way, with His grace into the situation. So, and forgiveness. So, people mistreated according to Dizdar's prejudiced advice and example. Even a normal person who was wrongly accused of being a satanic super soldier and treated with prejudice, paranoia, accusations, rejection, etc. by other people in the community, that person could come under demonic oppression and result of abuse and mistreatment even without a history of past abuse. These teachings are potentially a recipe for disaster that could take a normal person and put them through abuse and mistreatment, which could easily cause demonic oppression where none was prior. But in the case of those who are already under demonic oppression from past abuse, which has not been dealt with properly, likely due to not knowing how to deal with it properly, for them, these teachings have the potential to cause worsened demonic oppression if the person is further abused or mistreated, as is likely, as a result of Dizdar's prejudiced teachings. The example he sets of violating counselor-client confidentiality, mistreating his client, and everything else he teaches of paranoia, prejudice, and fear against those with MPD or SRA backgrounds, this generally does not bode well for those his readers might work with should they try to work with or help those with MPD. It is possible that a vulnerable person could become convinced by a reader of Dizdar's works through suggestion. A normal but vulnerable person could become convinced through suggestion first of having MPD, then developing the symptoms, then of having SRA memories, finding them, then of having a satanic super soldier personality, and it displaying, then through prejudice, abuse, and mistreatment from the reader and or a local Christian community, it displaying to then have any demonic oppression on them be worsened from abuse or created from abuse. There is all the potential in Dizdar's teachings for pseudo-satanic super soldiers to be created and demonized from a normal person who is simply suggestible, and for innocent people to be hurt simply from being undiscerning. Seriously. That's how these things can work. There is all the potential in Dizdar's teachings for a normal person, through the power of suggestion and being led this way by someone who's pushing everything into this, for them to become a pseudo-satanic super soldier with basically a learned case of MPD, false memories of SRA, and a fake satanic super soldier personality. But most likely, it would probably be very real demonic oppression, but would it have really been present to start with, or would it have been caused by all this? And it seems pretty likely it would have been caused by, all of the oppression would have been caused by all of this. There really is potential in Dizdar's teachings for pseudo-satanic super soldiers to be created and demonized from a normal person who is simply suggestible, for innocent people to be hurt simply from being undiscerning and trusting these false teachings, or trusting someone who believes these false teachings and follows them. In fact, this scenario is not unprecedented. At least one pastor named Doug Riggs, after he developed an interest in MPD and SRA, had half of his congregation seem to come down with a case of MPD and SRA, almost like half of his congregation had caught the flu and come down with the flu. Riggs was pastorally counseling several members of his congregation prior to these MPD/SRA cases being quote-unquote identified. And there are some reports from former members of the church that SRA and MPD were taught on in larger meetings at the church as well. We can know this was not a problem of a local satanic group, as church members from different states and backgrounds started remembering the same key figure, one member's father, in their childhood SRA memories, despite them having been raised in different states, having met at this church, and their presence at this church together being largely coincidental. Arguably some, even many or all of these cases of MPD and SRA memories developed as a result of suggestibility from trusting a counselor and pastor who had MPD and SRA on the brain. Accusations were made against family members who protested their innocence, and church members isolated themselves from their families, which tore families apart. At least one woman involved with Riggs later claimed her grown son to be a Nephilim hybrid, raising the question of his humanity and potential to be saved. And my heart goes out to that man. What can you say to that? What can you say to that if your mother starts claiming you're unhuman? I'm sorry for that man. Sorry about his mother. Horrible things.
Oklahoma.
Dear Heavenly Father, we are grateful for the things you have given us. Pray that you'll bless this food to our bodies.
Jim and Fran Field are devout Christians, but that hasn't spared them from charges of Satanism made by a minister of the church. Jim and Fran have now lost their only daughter, Cynthia, who has been persuaded that they tortured and abused her in satanic rituals performed when she was a child over 20 years ago.
Living in this house that Cynthia grew up in since 6th grade, occasionally it's like living in a tomb. You walk through the house and it's empty.
Tulsa, Oklahoma, home of Jim and Fran Field, and sometimes described as the religious capital of America. One of the world's largest television ministries is based here, and there are some 700 churches serving a population of 750,000 people. The Morning Star Testimony Church. When Doug Riggs, the pastor, read about satanic abuse, the lives of these people were changed forever. In counseling sessions with their pastor, 14 members of this tiny congregation have come to believe that they have multiple personalities and that their own parents are Satanists who tortured and abused them in childhood. Among the 14 is Cynthia, the only daughter of Jim and Fran Field.
Let us pray.
Doug Riggs and pastors like him have used a modern idea in secular therapy to take their Christianity back to the Middle Ages. In counseling sessions lasting for up to 19 hours, Pastor Riggs claims to have discovered that one individual can have thousands of separate personalities, each possessed by its own demon. Sally, we were told, has several thousand possessed personalities.
We pray this in the name of our wonderful Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen.
This thing totally consumes my daughter's life. Totally consumes it. It's a tragedy that doesn't need to have happened. And it's a tragedy where Fran and I are not primary victims. Our daughter is the primary victim. She's the one.
We're all victims. There's no help. There's no healing. There's only destruction.
We were able to judge for ourselves when 7 members of the congregation agreed to talk to us under the watchful eye of Pastor Reeves.
I began to see some of these symptoms emerge in these people's lives and began to pursue more the understanding around the dissociative disorders and MPD.
As we listened to the pastor and his flock, a clear pattern began to emerge.
Shortly after Pam and I were married, we just began to have problems in our relationship.
Bulimia, I think, was more the issue of why I couldn't control my eating and why after work I would just go from donut shop to donut shop to donut shop and then binge and purge.
When they first came to their pastor with their eating disorders and marital problems, none of them had any memories of ritual abuse, let alone satanic parents. Indeed, before therapy, Perry only remembered love.
And I thought the only one who loved me was my mom. And I remember her drying my tears and different things like that. So now I know that she was one of the main perpetrators.
Did you have any recollections of ritual abuse before you came into counseling?
None.
There's the demonic realm is attached, which blocks the memory and then doesn't want the host person to remember anything because it reveals secrets.
Clearly, the demons are pretty good at their job, because Pam still has no memories of ritual abuse, even after therapy.
Very little memory of my whole life. After something happens, it's just gone. And of my childhood, there's very little memory. So...
But that hasn't stopped Pam believing she was satanically abused by her father, a charge he was never able to refute because of the pastor's insistence that all parental contact must be broken. Immediately, satanic memories start to emerge in therapy.
The system is caught in a double bind where they see their parents only on a good side as a part of the protective process.
It's catch-22. The more you love your parents, the more that proves their satanic power. The only way to escape is to cut off all contact.
You're not going to be able to have any effective entrance into that area if there's contact with perpetrators, whoever it is, whether it's parents or whoever it is. Sally is the most highly programmed person that I know of or I've ever heard of. When we got to her mother, she started to choke. She could not even renounce all occult ties and links with her mother.
With no opportunity even to discuss the past with parents and relatives, cut off and isolated, these people have turned inwards, feeding off each other's emotions and satanic memories.
Assault and assault and assault. This is not right, but I'm not old enough to do anything about it. I'm not old enough to really even cognitively decide what's going on or to deal with it.
I think the most horrifying thing is what they make you do to children through the abuse and then say that you did it or that you wanted to, even though they're the ones that forced you to do it.
The most painful memories, I think, as Tom said, I think it is having to become a perpetrator yourself.
They had me slay babies and young children. Then you have to digest different body parts.
Even more bizarre is the conviction shared by everyone here that as well as being victimized by their parents, they were all abused by the same man, Pam's father, Joe, who has never lived in this state.
Yes, it was my father who was pretty much the one in charge of all of this that's been going on.
Indeed, Pam now believes that her husband, Dan, who hails from Missouri, was abused in childhood by her own father. Doesn't it seem extraordinary to her that she should marry a man from a faraway state who should turn out to be one of her father's victims? And that so many other victims should come together from all parts of America and join the same church?
Well, without a doubt, it's been the Lord Jesus Christ who's led all of this together.
But who exactly is Pam's father?
He has been involved with heading up rituals to channel power to very high government officials on a global basis. He's been involved in rituals in the Soviet Union, Germany, France, the Vatican, England, the major world governments that have any kind of influence at all. He has been involved with that. Patty.
Pam's father died during the filming. He had been a salesman who had spent his entire life in Omaha, Nebraska, never once venturing overseas.
God the Father made Jesus Christ head over all principalities and powers, and you are now subject to him and crush you under his feet in the mighty name of Jesus Christ.
Sunday evening, and Tom is in therapy.
Cleanse them and to allow the issues, whatever they are containing, to be released and given to you. So these parts can find their home in the core, Lewis.
Tom's convulsions are called abreactions, supposedly body memories of the torture inflicted by Pam's father.
When I see what has happened to these people as children, I face rage. I mean, I could go down, I could go out in the midst, if some of these perpetrators came through the door after an abreaction or what I've seen to some of these children, I could probably kill them with my bare hands. I'm a Christian, okay? I know that's not the Christian thing to do, but I'm still human.
We drive you out in the name of Jesus Christ. And we now call upon the elect angels of God to change.
2 hours into the session, the pastor confronts a demon.
And we drive you out. We now bring to bear the name and the authority of Jesus Christ against all seals on the 9-year-old, and we explode the seals in the resurrection power of Jesus Christ. We explode the seals in the name of Jesus Christ. And I ram the sword of Jehovah right into you. And I step aside. We drive these creatures out of the name of the Lord of hosts. Answer to Jesus Christ of Nazareth. Say no. Look at his face and say no. Seal over the 15.
From the cross thy wisdom shining, bravest for
drive you out.
I think he has bought into a program that is disastrous to his members. It's a program that destroys rather than heals. I have not seen anyone who has been helped nor healed by this counseling that he has entered into.
The pain that I'm having to go through seems real small compared to what, in my mind, I'm putting my family through right now.
Cynthia, Jim and Fran's only daughter.
Cleaning up my home for this interview, it really got to me that the first time my mother's going to get to see my home is in a movie telling people how horrible my childhood was.
Cynthia's husband, Brad.
Well, at first I had a hard time with that because I could see duplicity in Cynthia. Part of her really continued to really love and grieve. When she'd cry for her folks or something like, hey, look at the pain I'm putting them through.
From Brad, we learnt that when sexual problems emerged in the early days of the marriage, he typically assumed that the fault was his wife's. Other assumptions soon followed.
And then being married, I could tell from our honeymoon on that something had happened to her in a sexual nature, even though she had no memory of being violated or raped or anything like that. I felt as her husband that she had been molested in some way sexually. And I could also see the inordinate attachment that she had to her parents. Not that parental love is not a good thing, it's a fine thing, but it was to the point where it was too much. It was just amazing.
Whatever his motives, Brad decided that Cynthia needed therapy with Pastor Riggs, so putting an immediate end to that troubling relationship between her and her parents. The effects on Cynthia were more complex.
Because there are still parts of me that want to be with my mother. That's the hardest thing.
But there's also parts of her that all they know is the bad times, the times they couldn't deal with, to the point that they did kind of split off and segmented her personality.
Sometimes it gets very confusing as to which the illusion is, and who is actually messing with my brain.
The last time that I saw her was when I went to her office at noon to take her to lunch.
I hadn't seen my mother for about a year, and it frightened me.
And I said, honey, I'm here to take you to lunch if you could go with me.
I said, Mom, you know, we can't get together right now. It's not safe.
And I said, I want to tell you one more time that none of us in your family, not I, not your father, ever abused you, that we have always loved you, we always will. We remember the happy times that we had together. I cherish those times that we had with you. And I said, I'm glad we had them. I asked her if I could hug her. And she put her hands on my shoulders. And I hugged her and I said, honey, I love you. I just wanted you to know that. And I said, call me when you can. And I left.
Yeshua HaMashiach, the one and only true and living God. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an idol or any likeness of what is in heaven above or the earth beneath or in the water under the earth.
Wednesday night at the pastor's house.
Yahweh, the Lord your God, and a jealous God. We pray, Father.
Sally is in therapy, she of the many thousand personalities.
And I'm asking you, Father, to bear testimony to these scriptures, that you would release...
4 hours into the session, Pastor Riggs confronts Jennifer, supposedly one of Sally's child personalities who was ritually abused by Pam's father, Joe.
Let's pray. Dear God, I ask you to cleanse me from all ritual sex with this man.
Dear God, I ask you to cleanse me from all ritual sex with this man.
Subjected to the true Jesus of Nazareth.
Subject to the true Jesus of Nazareth.
And get out of my life.
And get out of my life.
Uncle Joe, you're not my father.
Uncle Joe, you're
not my father. Uncle Joe is not this woman's father. I drive Uncle Joe, this lying spirit, out in the name of Jesus Christ. Hold on to me, Uncle Joe. Hold on to me, Uncle Joe. I claim Jennifer for the glory of Jesus Christ, and I drive out this lying spirit called Uncle Joe. Hold my hand. This is Doug Riggs. Feel the Godhead who lives in me. All 3 members of the Holy Trinity live in me. You think you're God, Uncle Joe. You feel the living Christ who lives in me. I hold on to you. And I'm asking the Lord Jesus Christ to channel his power right into your face. I drive him out in the mighty name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth. Every spirit that is attached to Jennifer that's blocking her from coming out. Get out until the Lord Jesus Christ. We encircle you with the elect angels of God. And I take your suffering right down to the feet of Jesus Christ and tread upon your God. All occult powers that are becoming for the ruling 12, the false prophet, the Antichrist, the 10 kings of the earth. We sever you from all occult powers. I paralyze you in the name of Jesus Christ. You are destroyed in the name of my Savior. Uncle Joe, now look into the eyes of your Creator, Jesus Christ of Nazareth.
The one you used to praise.
Laugh now.
The one you used to praise.
Laugh now.
You remember those praises?
You will destroy nothing because you are nothing. You are subject to me in the name of Jesus Christ. Now come out. Jesus of Nazareth is King of Kings and Lord of Lords. I castrate you of all power, rank, and assignment. I now ask my God to manifest the glory of Jesus Christ into your face. Look into the face of Jesus Christ. I command you to look into his eyes. You don't have the authority to kill anybody. Now you look into the face of Jesus Christ.
Should we have him quote Psalm 91? Yes, about the
I'm asking Gabriel to be present and quote Psalm 91, you creature. You know who Gabriel is, don't you?
In the shelter of the Most High will abide. In the shadow of the Almighty.
Sit still in the name of Jesus Christ. You're not to move.
You don't like the scripture?
I paralyze you. Read the scripture.
Dwells in the shelter of the Most High will abide in the shadow of the Almighty.
You're commanded to remain frozen. I drive you out in the mighty name of Jesus Christ. Release her. You're to go to where Jesus Christ sends you.
Because we can't explain something, we jump in with some supernatural explanation. And as a consequence, we have abused people, put them in snake pits. We've done the most horrible things in the name of religion.
Professor Hart is a devout Christian and the Dean of the Graduate School of Theology at Fuller, one of the leading Christian seminaries in America.
The idea that an evil spirit needs an alternate personality to give expression to itself is, in my opinion, theologically nonsense. Christian therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists need to be more outspoken in our concerns about the abuse that is being offered in the name of Christ as forms of counseling and therapy.
And if just one person who might otherwise submit to this kind of destructive therapy would be able to recognize it as it comes along and back off of it I feel that whatever sacrifice I may have done, this is worth it. I've done what the Lord would want me to do.
I reach in with the arm of the Lord and I pull you out. I pull you out in the name of Jesus Christ. Come out. Look into the face of Jesus Christ. That is a command.
So, this really does happen. It really does tear families apart. And it's cultic. And it hurts people. And these topics permeate people's lives. Keep them from having any semblance of a normal life. And they stay in it and they stay fixed in it. As such, looking at this example, it actually has happened. As such, it is not an unrealistic exaggeration whatsoever to think that the incremental confusion passed on to a normal person through suggestion from a reader and believer of Dizdar's teachings could result in that normal person developing MPD, SRA memories, and a satanic super soldier personality, being abused or mistreated by a reader follower of Dizdar, and coming under very real demonic oppression from abuse, if nothing else prior. While more objective medical research does not support Dizdar's numbers, claims, paranoia, or prejudice, it does support something else. It is alarming to see there realistically is potential for Dizdar's claims to create the presence of SRA, MPD, demoniacs, to create the presence of pseudo-satanic super soldiers, even close in their self-description to those he is prejudiced towards and teaches paranoia about. It is like a self-fulfilling prophecy in which belief in what Dizdar teaches can actually lead to seeing pieces of it seem to happen in part, or something similar. This teaching has the potential through suggestion to cause the very problems it purports to be reporting on presently, which are presently not backed by more objective numbers. As such, the bad fruit of this teaching is potentially irresponsibly causing the problems, potentially increasing the numbers of those with MPD or SRA or demonization or all of the three, increasing the numbers of those cases out there, increasing the level of demonic oppression on these people. It is very much like a self-fulfilling prophecy, and it all revolves around a false prophecy teaching which Dizdar received from demons, the prophecy of the Black Awakening, of SRA, MPD demoniacs, satanic super soldiers infiltrating the church and later going on a mass killing spree. This information about the future came from those manifesting demons or demons speaking through people. This information about the present and future should not have been trusted or believed as it came from demons. More objective research simply cannot support this reality and future prophecy. What is truly disturbing is that these teachings of false prophecy, if believed and spread, could lead into events like this in the future. However, the scope of the fulfillment of these would seem to be limited to believers in Dizdar's teachings, or those with MPD who are within the bubble of influence of his teachings and false prophecy. A limited fulfillment within that bubble of influence. While there is nothing to indicate a Black Awakening happening on a large scale worldwide as demons claim to Dizdar, there is some chance that in the bubble of Dizdar's sphere of influence, of those who believe in this false prophecy, those believers with MPD could become violent at the time of a crisis happening otherwise, just through the power of suggestion, already believing from these false prophetic teachings that this is what they will do, that this is what they must do. Dizdar's false prophecies and teachings are a very dangerous belief system for anyone to entertain belief in, but especially for vulnerable or suggestible people, especially those who are MPD or believe that they are MPD or are even open to thinking that they could be. So don't be open to believing that. It seems like there at best could be a very limited fulfillment just within the sphere of influence of those who actually have come in contact with and believe these teachings, but not anything on a worldwide scale. There is nothing to indicate a Black Awakening happening on a large scale worldwide, as the demons claimed would happen to Dizdar, which he believed, and that's where this future prophecy came from. So altogether, these teachings seem to do more to recruit those with MPD or normal people towards becoming oppressed and violent, and more towards teaching Christians fear, paranoia, prejudice, hard-heartedness, and how to mishandle and mistreat these people, furthering their problems. These teachings do more of that than these teachings do towards actually helping those with MPD or helping Christians to help them following biblical standards. Especially biblical standards of conduct. This bad fruit is, as might be expected in false prophecy and teachings which originally were derived from demons. Demons speaking through people, demonized personalities manifesting through people and speaking. So the truth is that people who do not reject but believe these false teachings and false prophecy open themselves up to delusion, belief straying from actual reality, and they could spiritually be opening themselves up to demonic oppression solely as a result of getting inside the web and influence of these false prophecy teachings, deceived in believing a false prophet. There seems to be demonic assaults which surround these teachings and draw people into belief in them. Both sides of this dichotomy, both those who are vulnerable and those who are not vulnerable to believing they have MPD, both those who are suggestible to think they have MPD, both those who are not, they both seem to be targeted by demonic attacks and tempted to morally compromise Christian standards for behavior, such as to love, as a result of getting involved with these and under the influence of these false prophecy and these false teachings. We've covered the possibility of a small percentage of the small number of those with MPD becoming violent in a crisis situation, even perhaps as a result of a suggestion they will do so from coming under the influence of this false prophecy of a Black Awakening. But what is just as concerning, or more concerning, and potentially more dangerous than violence because of the greater numbers involved, is the possibility of Christian believers in the Black Awakening false prophecy, paranoid Christians on the lookout for hidden satanic super soldiers, coming to hurt an innocent person who poses no real threat to them, an innocent person who is suspected of being a satanic super soldier. There are far greater numbers of Christians who might fall on this side of the dichotomy of fearing and being paranoid of hidden satanic super soldiers, who might come to use violence against a suspect in their midst or nearby, should a crisis situation arise, before that suspect has or even could do anything to hurt anyone. These people are paranoid, fearful of life or death situations and deadly violence coming from the suspected or accused, and are taught to have hearts hardened against these suspected or accused, to not treat them as they would want to be treated. Essentially, if a crisis situation were to arise, it is possible a paranoid follower of Dizdar might jump to violence against an accused or suspected satanic super soldier first, out of fear of an attack that has not happened yet, and might not even be coming in the first place, even preemptively striking someone innocent and harmless. It is the followers of Dizdar with paranoia that might be those more likely to be violent in a crisis and in larger numbers than those suspected to be satanic super soldiers. The Bible describes paranoia as associated with demonic oppression, so we can read in John 7:20-21. Jesus said, "Did not Moses give you the law, and yet none of you keepeth the law? Why go ye about to kill me?" The people answered and said, "Thou hast a demon. Who goeth about to kill thee?" Though in error in this instance, the people in Jesus' day clearly associated paranoia, thinking people were out to get you or kill you, paranoia as being a result of demonization, of being under the influence of the enemy. Again, there seems to be demonic assaults which surround these teachings and draw people into belief in them. Both sides of this dichotomy, those who are vulnerable and those who are not vulnerable to believing they have MPD, seem to both be targeted with demonic attacks and tempted to morally compromise Christian standards for behavior, such as to love. While we might like to believe that no true Christians would harm or murder an innocent person in cold blood out of fear, paranoia, or hatred, all we have to do is look at history to see example after example of those who called themselves Christians, persecuting those different than them, to prove that in fact the Church all throughout history has been waging an internal battle between those who call themselves Christians and those who actually act like them by practicing the love and non-violence Jesus Christ exampled. The Church in the present time is still in the same battle. Pharisees exist today also within the Church. The great danger in these teachings is the Church being corrupted from the inside out. Pharisees without love tempting others to follow them. It is not just possible, but even likely, that in certain situations of crisis, out of fear of a black awakening of supposed satanic super soldiers, that Christian followers of Dizdar's teachings might panic and in paranoia turn on those innocent of any actual crime, and harm or kill them, quote-unquote, preemptively. This could be violence against innocent non-Christians who for whatever reason are suspected of being satanic super soldiers, or this could be violence against other Christians, also innocent. In a crisis situation, it is not just possible, but even likely that a paranoid Christian engulfed in Dizdar's teachings might preemptively strike out against a threat that's not even there, though in paranoia they perceive it to be, shooting a ghost of their own imagination, but wounding a real and innocent person. In some Christians of certain groups, there is already a level of ignorance and prejudice against those who are different, and unfortunately too often more judgmentalism than outreach to those who look different, act different, or believe differently. The last thing that is needed is for current levels of fear or prejudice to be raised to panicked proportions out of fearing for their lives. When Christians persecute those in the secular world, it gives all Christians a bad name and hurts evangelism besides being unbiblical conduct. It also generates backlash. Should something tragic along these lines happen and an innocent secular person was killed by a paranoid Christian, murdered with no real provocation in reality, the secular backlash against Christians could be enormous. The last thing the Church needs is for the world to have an excuse to label evangelical Christians who believe in literal prophecy fulfillment as dangerous and violent extremists. These teachings truly are dangerous, both spiritually and even potentially physically, to those on both sides of the dichotomy, of anyone who comes under the influence of believing this false prophecy, and also dangerous potentially to innocent bystanders and in backlash to the Church at large. These teachings are potently dangerous if large numbers of Christians come to believe them, become paranoid against satanic super soldiers, and in a time of crisis generate violence from Christians against innocent bystanders, and in result cause a backlash of persecution against the whole Christian Church. My concern isn't those with MPD, but rather those without MPD who believe these teachings, who exist in larger numbers, and seem more likely in paranoia to become violent and on a larger scale. If false prophecy and teachings were drugs, and serpent seed was alcohol, and modern Nephilim hybrid teachings were marijuana, then Dizdar's teachings on SRA, MPD, satanic super soldiers, and of the Black Awakening would be the heroine of false prophecy and false teachings that are currently circulating and spreading out there in the online Christian conspiracy fringe community. Unlike the others, it's powerful. It's easy to get hooked on just a little, and to OD and die on just a little of this, spiritually speaking, and it gets people hooked long term. The impact this can have in a person's life can be powerful and powerfully detrimental. Dizdar, who is deceived, tries to fit these false prophecies into the Bible, citing Revelation 19:19, saying these SRA, MPD, demoniac infiltrators, these satanic super soldiers, are the armies of the Antichrist who in their Black Awakening or global, spontaneous mass murder killing spree will help usher in the rise of the Antichrist to power. For these prophecies were received by demons and are false. But if this fits anywhere in prophecy, it would be that this coldness towards another person is the core of what Jesus Christ prophesied would happen in the last days. Matthew 24:10-13. And then shall many be offended, and shall betray one another, and shall hate one another. And many false prophets shall rise, and shall deceive many. And because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. But he that shall endure unto the end, the same shall be saved.